How many of you are mentors? How many of you have been mentees? Yeah, and I think that's the point that Maria was trying to make, that we all who mentor have been mentees. And actually, my mentor is sitting right in the back, Dr. Harold Murai, who was the equity coordinator for a very long time in the College of Education, and then when he retired, but by the way, retirement in quotes, because he's constantly, he's still mentoring, still supporting students more than ever. But then I took over at the official role of College of Education Equity Coordinator, and as such, started working with Marie in the Faculty Student Mentor Program, FSMP. A lot of what I'm going to say is related to how we in the College of Education, how we do things and how we have organized our faculty mentor program. And because of, as you'll see later, our population and our target group, we have often and always dealt with the issues of multicultural mentoring, and the whole ethics issue will be kind of interwoven, but at the end there's a couple points that we can go through. Because all of you are experts in this, I want you to share, as I'm sharing my experiences, raise your hand and say, oh, this is how we do it, this is how I've done it. Any questions you have throughout, hey, there's my peer mentor in our program, Davey. Actually, I was trying to locate you because I'm going to talk a lot about you and I'm going to refer to you. Currently we have one peer mentor, and that's Davey. Riley, we have usually more peer mentors, so I'll talk in general about the progression and how we've kind of set up our program. But please go ahead and share, ask questions, and also go ahead and share your own experiences. How do I click this? Yeah, cool. So most of the mentoring that has occurred is, and the research on mentoring and multicultural mentoring all has been very focused on the business world, and academia is actually a lot of it, and then with kids and youth and children. Pretty much, you all heard of, what is that, little brothers, little sisters, big brother. Little big. I mean, that's a mentoring program for youth. They're all mentoring programs, but there's formal and informal, and we pretty much are talking about the formal mentoring programs. And as such, the research actually, I'm not going to go over it that much, but I'm going to kind of talk a little about it. I know all of you know the issues, you know the definition of mentoring because you all have been mentors, but you still have to address it, just like you always have to address the population. Whenever you talk about anything related to race and ethnicity, socioeconomic class issues, you always have to start from where we are and historically. This is our current Sac State demographics, and it's straight up from the website. This is actually 2013, fall 2013. And what I don't have up here is California and Sacramento population. And that's always, in any kind of educational endeavor, in any kind of organization, you want to match your population, right? I mean, that's always the goal. That's what we strive for. But what do we know about organizations, especially higher education, in terms of past history of what the historical perspective in terms of diversity? Doesn't match. And it's actually historically many times gone to not be diverse, to not match. Now there's a lot of efforts involved in why you see a lot more mentoring programs and for organizations, businesses, mental health, everywhere, including university settings. Because research has said that the whole mentoring process is beneficial. So this is the student population. and now you look at the faculty population, right? It doesn't match the student population, which is why I believe the power of the peer mentoring in the faculty-student peer mentoring program, how important it is to make sure and ensure that we have an adequate pool of peer mentors to support our students. So nothing new, right? Yeah. One thing we notice is there's gender, there's ethnicity, but there's also class. And the other match is, and education is the other one, right? But if you get, it's just kind of, this is a done, no-brainer, but we do have to think about the impact of the fact that one of the things that we often hear about mentoring and successful mentoring is that the mentee and the mentor, protege, whatever you want to call it. I'm used to the mentee-mentor. It's always what you're used to the term, but add whatever term you want. That there is a match, and the match also goes down in terms of experience and in terms of both background and both socioeconomic status, gender, class, all that. And there's a difference, but there's meant to be a difference, right? Now, in the College of Education, this is what it looks like, and I want you to think about your college and your setting, your programs. We have mainly graduate programs in the College of Education. We have 2 undergrad programs, Deaf Studies, Child Development, and they're small compared to the array of other programs we have in the College of Education, as you can imagine. What do we mostly do? Teaching credentials. We graduate close to 700 teachers to go out into the schools and teach the youths out there in Sacramento, right? What does the demographic of Sacramento look like? Very, very diverse, right? So what kind of teachers do we want to recruit and come into our programs to go and fill the positions? We want diversity, right? Or at least also an understanding of the population they're going to be working with. So this is something that when we, in the College of Education, started the Faculty Student Mentor Program, we were very keen on thinking about who our population was. Now, the other thing that's important is the credential program attracts people from all other colleges, not just the College of Education, right? Not just Child Development Deaf Studies, but a big, big group is liberal studies students that are not in College of Education, or SSIS. The other group is single subject teachers, usually come from the single subject majors, English, music, math, history, ethnic studies, all those different majors. So our program, our efforts have to be not just within the College of Education, but have to spread out, which is, I think, a little different than most of the programs that you all are working with, right, in terms of the mentoring, because you stay more within your college, within your area. Now, this is the demographic characteristics of the College of Education. So you can see that, again, there's a little mismatch here, but I thought it's interesting to include the staff as well. You often see that staff is more diverse, right, than the faculty, but they're also important as allies in helping in terms of mentoring, because they mentor also. Now, one of the things here that I didn't do, but it'd be interesting to look at, is the difference between our students and the students within the university itself. And it's pretty comparable. However, what we find is that in terms of the Latino population, it's lower than, was it 20, 21, 20%, right? It was in the general. So there are some differences, but pretty much comparable. But then this is actually comparable to what you find in other colleges. So again, we always start off with who is our target population that we want to support. And in thinking of that target population, that's kind of how you then, or how we structured our program. Now, the other important thing that I want you to know about the College of Education is our mission statement. All of our programs, all of our colleges have mission statements, right? We spent, as faculty, a lot of time in retreats coming up with these mission statements and then put them up, and I don't know if we ever revisit them again or not. But in the College of Education, I revisit this all the time, constantly, because I feel that this is part of our identity, and I want it to be also part of the student's identity. And as you can see, there's a lot of discussion about the kind of students we want to have in the College of Education. And as such, the diversity, social justice, equity, active civic, all that stuff needs to be translated and become part of the mentoring program and activities that we provide, because we need to be responsive to the students. Now, for us, we have to first look at what our challenges were. And that's something that at the start of connecting with FSMP, we really looked at what were some of the barriers, the challenges for our students, our target students, coming into the program. And our target students are the URM, underrepresented minority groups. Includes socioeconomic status, includes any group that's underrepresented within our programs. And the way I've always seen it is, what kind of teachers do we want to go out there has to mirror the students that we have. And for us, it also includes language. So we have a program for bilingual teachers. So I recruit a lot for bilingual teachers, bilingual authorization, which is one of the certificates up there that I had before, a program that we provide. So that's another component that I do look for and I do target, is students that are bilingual. So in terms of, and the rest of kind of what I'm going to go through is recruitment, retention, and I'm actually going to leave graduation, but these are the areas and how we've addressed them in the College of Education. Now, again, from the literature in terms of underrepresented minorities, what do they need to succeed in university life? Access to information is huge. That tends to be one of the big ones. Role models is another one. And again, if you open your packet and you look on the left side and you look at the information about what is mentoring, also, I mean, this is exactly what's on there. So it matches really well. Supports. And supports are varied. And supports are actually targeted. Now, let me tell you a little about my background. My training is as a school psychologist. So a lot of what I have learned by being a mentor, and one of the nice things about FSMP is that we've often, before budget cuts, we actually used to often go to retreats. We used to go to conferences together, and there was a lot of knowledge building that had to occur around mentoring. But when I look at my training as a school psychologist, it totally matched. It totally gelled. And one of the things that we often talk as school psychologists is it supports. You can't just say, I'm just going to throw a bunch of things at you and hope one of them that you need and then you can be useful to you. But it's targeted supports. What do you need? And then supporting you in that. And in terms of underrepresented minorities, our target group, those needs may be quite unique and different than maybe a general population. And then also the looking at the barriers, and I wrote perceived barriers, because a lot of times, a lot of these barriers are perceived by the student, perceived differently by the faculty mentor, and perceived differently by the peer mentor. And this is something that we need to address as in our mentoring relationship with students. Now, these are just some examples of perceived barriers, but a lot of these perceived barriers are barriers that may be quite accurate, but also are a stereotype of the population. When I first began serving as equity coordinator in the college, there was a welcoming for a huge group of students, mainly underrepresented minority students, students of color, low-income students, and we were in the union. There was a bunch of students, and I honestly cannot remember what it was about, but I went to it because I'm thinking, I'm the equity coordinator. I have to go to all these things now. I have to attend these different events, which is true, by the way. But I went not really knowing what it was about. But what struck me was the administrator that is not present anymore, is not here at the university, who spoke to the students, began by saying the fact that a lot of them weren't going to make it. And I've heard that before. I've heard, people start with that, and I know that when I've done my EOP freshman seminars, I address that I give them the demographics. But what I noticed is, and I think that we do tend to do this, is as the mentors, we tend to, a lot of times it comes off as this, not as you need to overcome this, but it comes as this is your lot in life. And a lot of things that are levied upon our students of color are actually things, stereotypes that we have created for our students, and may serve as the self-fulfilling prophecy for these students. So they do need to be addressed, and we often address a lot of these issues with our students in many different ways, but I still want to say that they're perceived. They may actually be present. For example, a lot of our students work 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 jobs. They don't have part-time jobs. They have full-time jobs and full-time class loads. So they may have more responsibilities at home, more responsibilities than other students that are not our target population. So that is an issue, but what I have found is that many faculty members especially then say, well then, I don't think this program is right for you right away. I hear that in our college all the time. Our credential program is very stressful. It's more than full-time. It is very compact and very rigorous. And I often see colleagues say to students that have kids, oh, you can't work, you can't have kids, whatever. Yet I have seen hundreds, I'm sure Murai has seen thousands of these students make it through our program and become amazing, amazing educators. So I never take that for face value. I never say, oh, you have a job, you have a family, therefore you can't do our program. And I think we often kind of buy into that perceived barrier. I'm not saying it makes it easy for them, but it can be done. I always think of a student, and I know Murai knows her. She had 7 kids, and she's now, isn't she an administrator now? She's doing that. Amazing. I always tell her that I use her as an example constantly. It's amazing. Anyway, I'm sure you can put your own barriers here. There's a definition here, but I want you to look at this definition, and I want you to pick out for yourself those key terms that you feel are pertinent and important in mentoring students of color. Trusted and experienced supervisors or advisors who have personal and direct interest in the development and or education of younger or less experienced individuals, usually in professional education or professional occupations. So what terms jump out at you?
Trust. Trusted.
Yeah. These are the ones that I kind of, and so they're the ones you said also, the whole notion of the trust, I should have put that in actually a red because it does jump out even more. That is huge. It's huge. If you read any literature on mentoring, it is the cornerstone. Now, when you add the overlay of underrepresented minority students and issues of trust with the faculty or peer mentor, there's other dynamics that come into play that we need to be aware of and we need to actually deal with. Personal and direct interest. And this is to the student, to the mentee. And then the idea of being less experienced individuals. And this is why, for me, peer mentors are invaluable, and I work very hard to make sure that my peer mentors feel empowered and know that they are more experienced and more knowledgeable and can help and impart that knowledge. This is another one, and I want to kind of just point out some things in this definition. A mentor is a guide who can help the mentee to find the right direction and who can help them to develop solutions to career issues. Mentors rely upon having had similar experiences to gain an empathy with the mentee and an understanding of their issues. Mentoring provides the mentee with an opportunity to think about career options and progress. For me, the main thing about this definition and what really stands out for me is the idea that mentors are guides. And when you're, and this actually gets to whole ethical issues in mentoring, which is the power structures, which is a big issue in mentoring, and it can be very problematic in terms of the kind of power, because you're in a different power structure, both as a faculty and as a peer mentor. How many of you are peer mentors here? Come on, proud, loud, yeah. And I bet you all, many of you actually are peer mentors who didn't raise your hand. Faculty members, you're peer mentors. Hey, that's one of the things that in our college happens all the time is peer mentoring in our college. By the way, there's a lot of research on in education, it tends to be around the peer mentoring in the college. But the idea of a guide, and a guide as being a support, and this is the issue with working with a diverse population, is that the type of support, the experiences that that student has may be quite different than any other student. And trying to determine what support is needed and how much support. I know that in our college, one of the big things that I often heard was, you're doing too much hand-holding for your students. How many of you have heard that, those of you that have been mentoring? Yes, the hand-holding. And, you know, I would hope that my colleagues would trust me enough to know how I would scaffold that and how I would support my students, that it is a gradual support. And there are students that do need me to walk them over to the next step that I've given them. And that is okay if that is what they need. So that, by the way, you could tell that really, that's like one of those little irks that, you know, someone says, oh, your hand, you know, you don't know. This is, again, I don't want to bore you with the research. You know the research, it's self-evident, but, you know, again, the whole idea of what successful mentoring entails, the providing information. A lot of times it's career information. Like I said, a lot of these studies have been done on business, but for us in the College of Education, it's career, because we're helping students explore career choices, explore what, it's like, remember what your mom used to, what do you want to do when you grow up? That's what we help students decide what they want to do when they grow up. Serve as role models. And by the way, in multicultural mentoring, that is huge. That is actually, in the research on multicultural mentoring, that is one of the biggest areas where they've looked at that the role modeling is critical. And when they've looked at how role modeling is important, they've looked at the importance of having the mentors match the characteristics of the mentees. And because of that, when I have recruited, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but when I've recruited for my peer mentors, I recruit my peer mentors from my previous mentees. Almost every single peer mentor that I've had has been a mentee. There actually has been a couple times where I've not had peer mentors that were mentees, and they haven't always turned out as well. And I think it's because of this bottom one, that I've already established a relationship with the mentees. And so when they become peer mentors, we mentor together. It's more of a collaborative mentoring approach that we do. And I've already established a relationship with that mentee. The other one was activities. And this was replete in the research, body of research, the fact that you need to have planned activities. And I was thinking about how this works in the College of Education, and it is completely true that for us to actually have good body of mentees involved, we do have planned activities that we provide. There's drop-in advising, but there's a lot of other ways that we structure mentoring opportunities. And for the population that I target, that is very crucial, providing certain activities, certain outreach efforts that match what the student needs. I think part of it is that we always think we know what students need, and we may be right, but students may not know or may not think that that's what they need, and that's not how we're going to get them involved with us, is by saying, you know, we're doing this, you come to us. The other one is psychosocial support. And actually, the interesting thing is that in a lot of the cross-cultural studies, this has been found to differ depending on the differences between the mentor and the mentee. And this is the personal support. And we provide that as well, because you cannot divorce a student from all the areas of their life that impact and affect them. And we do deal with students that come to us and that we're mentoring and have some personal issues. And then this comes to ethical issues that we also need to address on how to deal with them, how to approach them. Because there are times where we need to provide, the support that we can provide is to refer, or the support that we can provide is informational, or support that we can provide is actually more empathetic. But to me, the psychosocial support is also students coming in and saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed with my classes, my job, and all this stuff, and providing them strategies, study strategies, things like that. And then the other one is the idea of solution focus, needing to address what some of the barriers are in a mentoring relationship. And again, barriers are going to be very different depending on the student. And then skill building, and skill building is an important one. And it's funny, they talk a lot about that one in the business community and also in mentoring other faculty members, but I haven't heard it so much when we talk about mentoring in an educational setting for both college students, grad students, and professors, or youths and adults. But skill building, I do believe, is, remember we talked about the hand-holding and the letting go? That's part of the skill building. And that's part that some of our students need to learn, how to access and how to speak to, when they go to financial aid, when they go to LASSEN, how do you ask for information? What I have found is, for a lot of my students, is they don't always know how to ask those questions. So when they go out to other other programs or places in the university, they don't get the answers that they need because they don't know how to ask for what they need. I find that all the time when I have students come in after I've said, go see a professor about something. They come back and I'm like, well, what did you ask? And then I get, okay, no, you didn't ask the right question, so they didn't know how to help you.
I was going to add in terms of skill building, that's the coaching part of mentoring.
Right.
Although coaching and mentoring are different in the sense that mentoring is open-ended and coaching is outcome-driven. Coaching is an inherent part of mentoring, so that's where the skill building comes in.
Good point. Yeah. I feel that the skill building looks different for the faculty mentor than for the peer mentor. I often find that the best way a peer mentor can help students skill build is by relating it back to personal experiences. This is how I talk to my professor. This is what, that is, and why I prefer that than just saying this is what you need to do is because, again, of that relationship of the peer mentor. And a lot of times this is what you need to do doesn't translate as well. And it's not, I think what we want is an outcome that's lasting, right? And then going back to the addressing the problem, solution focus. Solution focus is very big in counseling and psychology. And it's actually one of the things that is, if you're a school psychologist and you're doing counseling in the schools, that is one of the favored approaches is solution focus because you don't have, years to meet with this. It's like, we got 8 to 10 weeks, solution focus based on one thing. But what I have found is that it is actually a good model to use in mentoring as well. And that is where instead of trying to come up with why did this happen, all stuff is just, okay, what's the issue and what are some problem-solving approaches that we can use?
Many times advice giving gets crossed into it, and that's thinking that it's mentoring, when professional information is more important, and let the student decide with options, versus a student poses a question, what class should I take? And you say, oh, take math, and take it with so-and-so because it's easy.
Yeah. Very good point. And I think that goes back to the guidance. You're guiding students. Yeah, very good point. And I think that is something that we need to really be careful when we are mentoring, that it doesn't become both the advice giving and also telling students what to do, but seeing ourselves as, in terms of the, providing information, where we are the know-it-all. Although I do know it all. But it all comes down to this, the relationship. And that is the biggest part of it all is establishing a relationship. And then, again, this is general mentoring. And again, most of you know this because I think it's obvious, but also if you've read any little part of the research, it's all there. The whole idea of listening as being critical and important. And it's active listening, right? Where you're actually asking questions, clarifying, and it's focused on the mentee, not the advice giving. See, that's what we get into. Because we're listening and we're thinking, okay, well, this is how I'm going to fix that, this is how I'm going to fix that, and you're like, okay, well, this is what you need to do. Versus focusing on what actually the mentee is saying, not on how you're going to solve the problem. And that's hard for a lot of us. The fact that we're mentors means that we like to help people. There is a very, I ran across a couple studies that talk about mentees and who mentees are, and, we're like these people that just want to go out and, change the world. It's very altruistic, which is good. I mean, that's a good place to be. But we don't want it to lead to what you were just mentioning. So the idea of active listening, and active listening, like I said, involves questioning, reflecting back, making sure you really understand what the student is trying to tell you. And by the way, with a lot of my students that are, and so I'm Colombian. So I look Latina, which I am, but I'm Colombian. And there's a big difference between me being Colombian and someone else being Latino. There's a big difference that I came here to the United States when I was 9. Big difference that I grew up in Los Angeles, and I'm very much of a city person, not a rural person. So my understanding of many of the students that look like me is different. I did grow up poor and poverty. I was in EOP when I was in undergrad. I went through the similar experiences. However, I'm not low income now. Makes a difference. So I have found so many times that I think I know what the student needs or is trying to tell me, and I have been completely wrong. And I always tell my students that come see me, I'm going to ask you tons of questions. And they may seem irrelevant, but it helps me get to know you, and it helps me understand you better. And to me, understanding the student, really, the whole part of the student as a complete whole entity, helps me to understand and to think about what I need to do to support the student. My peer mentors ask tons of questions as well, and they ask tons of questions of me as well. And that is important to have that communication open. I have so many examples of times where I've totally messed up because I thought I knew what the student was asking, what the student wanted, or what the student needed, and I was completely wrong. We don't want to get into that. The idea of mutual interests. And in all mentor relationships, there has to be a mutual interest. And that's actually a given for us. It's like built in because they're interested in kids and wanting to complete their degree and wanting to do something in the educational field. And that to me is something that I'm interested in as well, and why all of my peer mentors are students within the majors of the students that they work with, similar interests. The idea of non-judgmental support. I hope my hair's not sticking up in the back. Non-judgmental support. This again becomes really difficult, and I have to check my judgments constantly. And I have tons of judgments. One of the classes that I used to teach in our old credential program was the multicultural class. And one of the things that I always told them at the beginning was two important things, two important concepts. One of them is that teaching, education, I'm going to include mentoring this, is a political act. It's a political act. And we need to embrace that and know that it is. We are not neutral, ever. We're not. We bring who we are into it. We don't even have to say a word. You look at me and you look at, you see that I have graying hair, so you know that I'm getting on in age. You see that, I'm maybe a little darker, so I'm probably Latino. I don't even have to speak, and you already know something about me, right? And you already have some perceptions or ideas about me. It's all part of it, and that's okay though. There's nothing wrong with that. But we need to just be aware. The other thing I tell them is that I constantly, every day, have to check my biases and prejudice. And I always tell them the story about how, I tell my freshmen this as well. When I was younger, so I told you I was Colombian, came here when I was about 8 or 9. And we came to Los Angeles, and it was South El Monte. Very, very Mexican, but more Chicano Mexican. And so my notion of Chicano Mexican means you're like second generation. So you're born here, but you're Mexican. Both parents are Mexican. I know that that's kind of changed. When I speak to another colleague who's younger than me, grew up in LA, her idea of Chicano is different. And I think, it's like that cultural change of the term. But very gang, kind of low income. And there were tons of instances of a lot of prejudice being levied at me. I remember one time I was walking down the street and this person in this super nice car, I think it was actually a Mercedes, rolls down his window and he says, "Wetback, go back where you belong," kind of thing. I must have been like 10 or 9 or something. And I remember walking, and as a kid, you have ways of kind of dealing with things, right? Ways of coping. And in my mind, how I made it okay was, well, first of all, I had to find out what a wetback was. I had no clue what a wetback was. Yeah. Could have been a good thing, who knows? What I realized was, and this is how my young mind worked this out, was they're saying that because they think I'm Mexican. So they don't like Mexicans. Mexicans must have done something bad for them not to be liked. I'm not Mexican, so I'm not going to take that on. So I shielded myself from any prejudice because I was like, oh, they think I'm Mexican. But I'm not. So I'm actually okay, but it's the Mexicans that are bad. And I actually had a prejudice against Mexicans growing up because it was them that did it. And it was my way of shielding myself from not, having to deal with the fact that these strangers are hurling these insults at me. And it's like, I still to this day can't understand how any adult can do that. It's just, again, but that was like, there was a lot more of those. And it wasn't until I went to college that I kind of grappled with this. But I always say that I always have to check my prejudice and my assumption. And when something is starting to bother me, I have to think about, why is that bothering me? Does it really matter? And I'll tell you something that comes up a lot in the mentoring process with my peer mentors and myself. One of the supports and services that we provide is we actually, with some of the equity money, we use to help pay for certain tests that are requirements to become a teacher. And it's costly. It can run over, like $350 altogether. So, some students, that's a big barrier to them even applying for the credential program. So we support students with this pot of money. One of the things that has happened in the past is the peer mentors feel very protective of me and of the funds. And I will have peer mentors come and say, we shouldn't give them money because, they really, they're driving a nice car, they have a better car than you, or different that's an easy one though. Anybody has a better car than I do. But different things come up. And I sometimes get that also, where I start getting a little judgmental about, are you really in need? Do you really need this? And I have to really check my assumptions of what their need is. I think that is an issue, and I know that's happened several times with peer mentors, that we have to kind of back up and say, okay, let's, or they're using this, they're using our services, meaning they don't really need it, they're using the resources that we have. Oh, the dynamic, that's another big issue of mentoring in terms of it being very dynamic, and because of that, because of the ever flow and change, it's important to continue to, and this is one of the things that happens a lot, is that I think I do all the good listening up front, and then I don't need to listen anymore because now, I totally know what's going on, and then my interactions with students then are like, okay, now I know. But they're very dynamic. And they're dynamic also in terms of the relationship, but in terms of the information and in terms of the interest and the mentees' goals. The whole idea of information gatherer versus what we talked about before, where you're information giver. You're gathering information and facilitating that for the student. The nice thing is that I lied before, I really don't know anything, and I'm often having to gather information. That's where my school psychology background comes into play, because as a school psychologist, I always felt that I was like CSI, school psychology, like I was always trying to figure out what's wrong with this kid, and I was always trying to me it was like this wonderful forensic experience. And that's something that I was taught to continue to do that in my mentoring process, where you're often trying to gather information to support and help your student. And the peer mentors and I do that constantly. We constantly say, okay, hey, let's research this. Hey, let's find this out. Let's figure this out. Because we don't know it all. We don't know a lot. And we're always having to question. And the beauty is that my peer mentors and I originally were in an office. It was a tiny office, but it actually afforded for close contact, and we were always together. Now we're separated in two offices, but they're next to each other. And then the mentoring process is also part of the relationship. In terms of underrepresented minorities and the research on mentoring, a lot of it is broken into three things. Access is a big issue in diverse mentoring, and that is students' access to mentors, one. And two, when they do have access to mentors, do they have access to mentors that are familiar, knowledgeable, and represent them? Interactions, and there's a lot of cross-cultural research on mentoring interactions and how it changes and it differs. And it started out from looking at gender issues in business, and it's gone down to issues of race and class, and how those mentoring relationships are really affected by who your mentor is, the background experience of your mentor, and then also within the experiences, what mentors tend to focus on. Like really briefly, the female mentors, and this is studies like in the late 70s, early 80s, tended to do more kind of social emotional mentoring, where the male mentors tended to do more career mentoring, things like that. And then outcomes. And yeah.
A question that comes to mind for me as you're talking about this, do you have an opinion on the difference in the construct where the mentee selects their mentor versus a mentor being assigned to a mentee? Any thoughts, observations on that?
The match or the appropriate fit for mentor-mentee in the research is huge. We, in our college, don't have that luxury of having, all these numbers of mentors, and usually it's kind of you get who you get, and you don't fret. No. It's not. We don't have that that issue because we don't have a way to solve that. Now, what the idea of a mentee picking their mentor would be, I think would be beneficial if there was enough information about the mentor to the mentee. Usually, all the research suggests that it should be matched, and that whoever is coordinating needs to do the match. Like I said, I honestly, whenever we actually can't, we don't have a match. We don't have a base or a set number to do a match. So we actually work around that by the training that we do.
I wanted to add that we understand that there's too many students for the faculty, staff, or peers that we have. I mean, we don't have the resources for that. And I think it depends on the type of mentoring that you want. What are you seeking? What is the student seeking in that particular individual? It's very difficult for us to match them. They actually seek us. And because we're academically related, they know exactly what they're coming to us for. However, for what reason varies. In my particular case, my mentor chose me. And my mentor was an assistant vice president at the time, or director of programs, and then from there became an assistant vice president. But she really saw something in me that really had her come and do all the mentoring with me. And that was paired with the classes that I was taking. So it was really, I was getting from the practical side, and I was also getting it from a theoretical side. So matching really has to do a lot to temperaments too. We know that not all people of color are good mentors. Or for example, and so what I'm trying to do with the students is to say, you know, there are people out there that want to stretch out their hand and help you out, regardless of who they are, regardless of their ability, etc., that want to help you out. Take that hand. So that's basically how I answer that.
In the College of Education, the access for us is recruiting. And for us, the interaction is when our efforts to retain students, and outcomes is graduation. But I would think it as, oh, this isn't the why. Sorry, I got carried away. It's the why, what, and actually more of when. But the why is, I feel it's important for mentees to know why us? Why do they need to come to us? The what is in the interactions, what do we do when we're with them? And then the when is in terms of the outcomes, is like the goals. But I'm going to talk about the first thing. I'm going to go quick. This is in terms of what you're talking about, the matching, the screening for faculty to peer mentor, and the kind of how the important kind of best practices. This is the best practices. And what I want to show you is kind of how we do it in the College of Education. So, recruiting or accessing. Like I mentioned before, the way I recruit mentors is former mentees. That has been the best. Because I also know that they understand, and I also know that they then are part of the group. So they understand from the student's perspective better than I do. And they actually serve as cultural brokers to me a lot and explaining things to me that I don't understand. They also know the institution, the university, in a way that I will never know because I'm not a student here. The interview process has been, hey, do you have a job? Do you want a job? Doing what? Mentoring, doing what? You know, that has been, for many students, a recruiting process. Very kind of loose, but I've known the student. How long did I know you before I recruited you? Okay. Now, we actually instituted an interview process because I had a couple years ago a little, there wasn't a good match between the peer mentors and myself and the students. And so what I realized is that I needed to actually have some way to, like my whole thing about, you know, are you on time, are you this, are you, you know, your regular interview questions, those are good, those are important. But for me, what was important to me was that whole notion of diversity, the multicultural piece, because the students that I target are very diverse, culturally, linguistically diverse, socioeconomically. There's a very specific group I target. And I needed to know that my peer mentors fully understood that, to the complexity that my students come with, that they understood all of that, and they would be able to deal with it. Now, I wrote this whole list of questions, and I can share them with you if you want. And what I did was I did your regular interview where I gave it to them beforehand, they filled it out, and then they came in and then we asked them questions. Did I give that to you?
It was like a half sheet.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me tell you the process. So I did that, they came in and they answered pretty much the questions exactly like you would expect them to be answered by somebody that knew how to answer those kinds of questions. And I ended up hiring them. The funny thing is that I knew I was going to hire them, but that was just my little pilot. And I realized that that really wasn't getting at what I wanted. So I realized that I needed to do some kind of vignettes. And I actually, after I hired them, like 5 minutes later, I said, what did you think of the question? So how can we do better? So, and I said, how do I screen out people that are downright prejudiced? How do I screen out people that don't really get or understand the population? And so they actually said, you may want to ask them questions like that really happened that they would have to deal with. And that was awesome. So that's what we actually came up with. And it was a lot more helpful to me than asking your, and you know those generic, because all of you, if you've gotten a job at Burger King, you've answered those questions, right? But it was more important for me to get at them. And the other thing I did is I asked more about their background and how they grew up and their experiences. And it became more of a conversation versus an actual interview. And I felt that was so much more powerful because also, I actually got a job working with kids after I told the director of the program that I didn't like kids. And the reason why she hired me later on, and that became like my life, that became my avocation, my profession. And I asked her, why did you hire me? And she said, because I knew that, like, you could, like, not you could be trained, but that you were willing to learn. And that to me is the most important thing about my peer mentors. They're always willing to learn. They don't say, oh, this, nope, I'm on my up on this. They're willing to be a part of that process, which is dynamic. And this is part of the training. And the way I trained with Murai was I sat in his office. Was it a month that I sat there with you? In that chair? And he would be mentoring students, and I sat there and took notes. They would leave, and I would ask him questions. And then another one would come in. And they'd leave, and then we'd process. That's what I did with my peer mentors. I made them sit with me while I was mentoring students. And I would say, by the way, this that I just did was advising, not mentoring. This was mentoring. That was, again, more time-consuming, but amazing. And then as I get, my ideal is to get a peer mentor that's been with me for a while, one coming up that's been there for like a year, and then a newbie. And I've been able to have 3 mentors. We're down to 1 this year, but we've been able to have 3 mentors. And I would rather them have fewer hours, and it's harder on them, I know, but to have them in the process because they then train each other. And my peer mentors are very much willing to ask questions, to go with me, and we process things together. The initial training is paramount because it's hard for me to sit there and foresee everything that's going to happen. I can tell them the activities that we do, but not the actual mentoring. The other one is setting the expectations. That is huge. What is their expectations that they have? And then what are my expectations? That's huge. And also them understanding that they need to understand the expectations of the students, and of the mentees. And they need to come back to me when these don't match. And by the way, ethics, this is the other big issue, is expectations don't match. Where students are expecting certain things from you, or their peer mentor, that's not what we, anything that we can do. Or we have expectations of them that's not what they're thinking of their role is. So that role setting and expectations. And the ongoing training is huge. In our college, things change constantly. So we have to keep communicating and ongoing, but also ongoing training in terms of, hey, this just happened. I just got this email. Constantly talking about that. We've tried to set up meetings, but that never works. We've tried to work with, the once a week or every other week. But what we found most successful is just on the fly. And that's how it works better for us. And in terms of the mentees, there's important that for them in terms of recruiting them, there's tons of activities, but my thing that has been most important and why our college, the mentoring program has grown from the first year to now, that's increased every single year, is because we tried to find out what do they need and then form supports for that. And one of the things that they needed was these tests I told you about. They need information on, they need help in paying for them, but they also need how to take them information about them. And that's the first thing we set up was these study sessions. And we've gotten tons of people to come for that. So we think we know, I think I know what they need, but they never come to those events. It's when I found out what they need and then form events around it, that's when they come. And then, yeah, the matching I was going to say, pie in the sky, doesn't happen with us. Feedback is huge. We really try to get feedback, and we do have forms that they fill out almost every other time they see a peer mentor. We haven't had them do feedback on me, which we need to do. I don't know why we haven't done that, I wonder. But feedback in terms of how it's going for them. We have them do in writing and verbally. And then retaining interactions, just a couple things I wanted to say is the formal and informal meetings and the advocacy. The formal and informal meetings, this also comes into play when, let me quickly go to the ethics. Because our peer mentors are students also, and in fact, they often in their classes will say, hey, by the way, we're having these study sessions, we're having these meetings, and that's one of the ways that we recruit, where they go and talk to them. The other thing is that students will go to them and ask them questions when they're walking down the hall, whatever. So it's a lot of informal mentoring for them. It happens to all of us, right? We're just walking down and someone asks us something. But there's a kind of, we have to do a little limit setting, especially for my peer mentors. And this has been an issue that we've had because we do have a tutoring component as well. And sometimes my peer mentors are asked to tutor and they feel compelled to do these things kind of outside of when their time is. And that's hard for them because they want to help and support, but it's really an important thing to have that continued communication with them. The other one is in terms of the role delineation as well is an issue. What the role is of the peer mentor and the faculty mentor in the process. And mentees need to really understand that and know that. Because I know sometimes they pressure the peer mentors for things. And the peer mentor's like, I can't, and that's kind of an issue that we often we've needed to address in the past. And my peer mentors are super nice, and that's a problem. They get a little tougher. And then the other one is the kind of power structure and privilege, which is huge. And we cannot underestimate that. And one of the things that has happened before is that I've had students that have not been able to talk to me because of who I am, and they've had some issues. So we had a student that there was some kind of really big things happening with a faculty member, wouldn't come to me. So I called the peer mentor and I said, hey, talk to them, maybe they'll talk to you. And this is an important piece. The peer mentor was of the same ethnic group as the student. And to this day, I believe that was huge. It was a Hmong student. And I felt that and then I have a lot of Hmong students mentees that I work with, that for me it was very important to have a Hmong peer mentor. Because I do not understand, and I was not a good a fit for that student. When I recruit, I try to recruit a good cross-section of students so that there is a good representation of my peer mentors that match the population that I work with. To me, it's imperative. It makes a huge difference. Even though I think that I'm not, and even though I do serve as a role model to my Latino students, I think I'm still too many generations removed. And I need peer mentors that really understand, because I do go and recruit. I go to the Hmong Association, I go to the different associations, and I take my students with me because they're the ones that are representing our program, not me. So anyway, that's it.